जैक केबल आपको नहीं थोड़ी नीचे नहीं है ये आमत
नीचे होगा
इधर ये बोले ना चालू करो मुझे सिस्टम का माइक चालू एक मिनट ना चालू करो
Hello students, welcome to economic class. Stay healthy and wash your hands frequently. Now yesterday we discussed that in the year 1991, India faced a financial crisis due to various reasons, right? And India went for asking for a loan to World Bank and IMF. To avail the loan, international agencies expected India to liberalize its economy. Liberalization in a very simple terms, we mean to say to open up the economy, right? India agreed and introduced its new economic policy 1991 in the month of July. Under this policy, government had many policies, but they were subdivided into three main heads, and they were liberalization, privatization and globalization. The new economic policy 1991 was introduced in the month of July. Why was it introduced? It was introduced to avail the loan of $7 billion from the World Bank, which is also known as International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, that is IBDR. World Bank and IMF asked India to open up the economy. India accepted and introduced new economic policy under which we used three main policies, and they were liberalization, privatization and globalization. What do you mean by liberalization? Liberalization refers to removal of barriers of entry and growth of the firm. Removal of barriers of entry and growth for the firms. Privatization. Privatization refers to giving away the ownership, management and control of public sector to the private. Privatization means giving away the ownership, management and control by the public sector to the private sector. And what do we mean by globalization? Globalization is nothing but integration of nation's economy with the world economy. Now, how is it possible to integrate our economy with the world economy? It's just possible if we remove the restriction related to international trade. We will discuss in detail what is liberalization, privatization and globalization and various reforms related to that. But before going further, let us discuss what was the main aim and objective of new economic policy. The main aim of the policy was to create more competitive environment. When I say to create more competitive environment means to create more competitive markets. In class 11th, we have learned about 4 types of competitive market, and they are perfectly competition, monopoly, monopolistic competition and oligopoly. So to create these 4 established market, the objective was that government has liberalized the economy. Second objective was to remove the barriers to entry and growth restriction of firms. Here we are not specifying for private firms only, because government has also allowed to take a free decision to the public sector for better growth and development of industries. Right? So 2 objectives were to create more competitive environment, means to create more competitive markets, and to remove the barriers to entry and growth restrictions of the firm. When I talk here about the firm, they are both the types of firm, private as well as the public. Now, what were the measures required for new economic policy? The first measure is stabilization measure. When I talk about stabilization measure, I mean 3 important things. First, to correct the weakness of BOP. Yesterday I have discussed with you what is balance of payment. It is an account maintained by the government in which government records all the international economic transactions. During the year 1991, one of the crises was deficit in BOP. That means imports were more and export were less. So anyhow, we were supposed to cover the weakness of BOP. That means we will be balancing BOP without utilizing our foreign exchange reserve kept with RBI. Second measure is to increase the reserve of foreign exchange. Why is it important to increase the reserve of foreign exchange kept with RBI? Because it helps us to pay the interest to the international agencies. Also, it helps us to pay the import deficits which occurs in BOP time and then. The third is to correct the inflation. Now, to correct the inflation in an economy, there are basically two policies: government fiscal policy and monetary policy of RBI. Government has to establish these two policies in a well systematic manner to control the inflation in the economy. So when we talk about stabilization measures, we talk about three important measures, that is correcting the weakness of BOP, then maintaining foreign exchange reserve, and third, to correct the inflation. Second comes structural reform measure. Under structural reform measure, government plan to increase the efficiency of an economy. How do we increase the efficiency of an economy? It's very simple. We have to make the optimum utilization of available resources, and we need to decrease the wastage in the economy. So government planned along with the public and private sector to optimum utilize the available resources and to reduce the wastage in the country. And second was to increase the competition. Why is it important to increase the competition? When competition increases in the market, the benefit goes to the consumer, and also industries develop in a competitive environment. So under structural reform measure, there were two things which were put emphasis on. First was to increase the efficiency of the economy, and second was to increase the competition. So I hope you are clear that under new economic policy in 1991, there were three main policies: liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Definitely we are going to learn in detail about them. But in brief, it is very important for you people to understand what were the main aim and objectives of this policy. The objective was to create more competitive environment and to remove the barriers to entry and growth restriction of the firms. And what were the measures? First measure was stabilization measure, and second was structural reform measure. Now, coming to the part of liberalization. As I have already discussed with you, what is liberalization? It refers to the removal of barriers of entry and growth restriction to the firms. Before 1991, even if Indian adopted mixed economy method, government actually controlled the economy. And due to this reason, there was very less investment in the private sector. And hence, our new economic policy began with liberalization method after 1991. Now, what was the purpose of liberalization? The purpose of liberalization was to unlock the economic potential. Yes, to unlock the economic potential with the help of private sector, which was being ignored for the 40 years, right from 1950 to 1990. The second purpose was to create more competitive economy. We know that except few industry, most of the public sector industries were not performing well. Their performance were highly disappointing. So when we invited private sector to participate in the development process of industries, so we gave a good competition to the public sector also to compete in the market and to unlock their economic potential. So the main purpose of liberalization was to unlock the economic potential and to create more competitive economy. Under liberalization, there were few reforms which we introduced. They were industrial reforms, financial sector reforms, tax reforms, foreign exchange reforms, and trade and investment reforms. Now when I talk about industrial reforms, so in industrial sector, what are the changes which were required during that period of time? First change which was required was in the method of licensing. Second change which we needed was regarding expansion and growth of existing industries. So this is we are going to discuss in the industrial reforms. When I talk about financial sector reforms, I mean to say the banking system of our country. I mean to say the control of RBI over the commercial bank and setup of new private banks. When we talk about tax reforms, how the taxes are to be paid to the government. If I ask you a very simple question, how many taxes are there? You may say that there are many types of tax. say for sales tax, import duty, export duty? But the answer to this question is very simple. There are only two taxes. One is direct tax and another one is indirect tax. We will discuss in detail what is the difference between direct and indirect tax and what were the reforms introduced under liberalization in tax reforms. Okay, when I talk about foreign exchange reforms, here I mean to say how the money which was partially convertible went into the fully convertible situation under foreign exchange market. And initially India decided the value of currency according to fixed exchange rate. But after liberalization measure, India converted the money completely and hence our money was under the situation of flexible exchange rate market system. Fine, that is we are going to discuss in detail. Last is trade and investment reforms. Here we are going to discuss about import and export policies. We know that there has been a considerable change in the trade policy during colonial period, during post-independence periods, and again we required a sustainable change in trade and investment policy. Now these are the 5 important points you need to keep in your mind when you talk about liberalization. Under liberalization, these are the 5 factors we are going to learn. That is industrial reforms, changes made in industrial sector, financial sector reform, changes made in the banking sector, tax reforms, changes made in direct and indirect tax, foreign exchange reform, changes made in foreign exchange market, and trade and investment reforms, changes made in import and export. So in a very simple terms, this is industrial sector, this is banking sector, this is direct and indirect taxes, this is foreign exchange market, and this is nothing but import and export. Let us begin with industrial reforms. Now under industrial reforms, if I go back to the colonial period, I remember the colonial rule was responsible for the decline of our famous handicraft industry. Now after post-independence period, industrial sector was basically controlled by the government. There were exclusively industries were classified into 3 schedules, which we read in chapter number 2, right? In schedule A, there were 17 industries which were exclusively with the government sector. In schedule B, there were 12 industries which were progressively controlled by the government. Progressively means along with the public, private will also contribute for its development. And only schedule C was given to private sector. So there were very few industries which were in the hand of private sector. The reason was private sector did not have capital investment, neither they had incentive to start up the industry. So government took away the industrial sector. But for better growth and development of an economy, under industrial reforms, what government did, it reduced the industrial licensing. Initially, during the period of 1950 to 1990, to get a license from a government was very tedious task. But here, government removed almost licensing restriction from all the industries except liquor, defense equipments, and industrial explosives. So government removed the licensing system from all the industries except 3. That is liquor industry, defense equipments, and third is industrial explosive. Also, license was not required for the expansion, for merge, for amalgamation. Now what is amalgamation? Amalgamation means when 2 or 3 companies come together for working. But then merge of a company or merger of a company is also the same. So what is the difference between merger and amalgamation? Merger means when 2 or 3 companies come together to start a new company. Got it? But amalgamation means when one of the company take over 2 to 3 companies and continue with the same work. So there is a difference between merger and amalgamation. Now initially these licensing were required for growth, expansion, and for diversification of a product. Yesterday I discussed with you diversification of a product means I am in an industry, I am producing something, now I have to produce something else. So for that also I required the licensing from the government. This was also eliminated. So under the reduction of industrial licensing, no license was required for the industries except liquor, defense, and industrial explosive. No license was required for expansion, growth, and diversification. Also, no license was required anywhere except the industries of security. Clear? Now, detailed notes about all these things we are going to give you with a PDF form. Maybe we are going to post you in your group or we are going to mail you. Fine. Now, second was decrease in role of public sector. As I have discussed, that industrial sector was classified into 3 schedules. Schedule A, Schedule B and Schedule C. In Schedule A, exclusively 17 industries were enjoyed only by public sector. Now, these was reduced to only 3 industries. Now, the government hold control only on 3 industries, that is defense, atomic energy and railway. Apart from that, the other 14 exclusive industries was given to private. This is how government decreased the role of public sector over 17 exclusive industries to only 3. Third is de-reservation under small scale industries. We have discussed in chapter number 2 that as private sector was not having capital, neither the incentive, government has to take over the industrial sector. But to get in help, government encouraged small scale industry to set up with a investment of 5 lakh. In 5 lakh investment for a small scale industries was during the Industrial Policy Reforms 1948, which was the first industrial policy reform after independence. But after that came Industrial Policy Reform 1956, under which the investment reservation was increased from 5 lakhs to 1 crore. And if we discuss about this situation, current situation or present scenario, the same investment is increased to 5 crore. So in today's scenario, a small scale industry is an industry which gets started up with an investment of 5 crore or less than 5 crore. Any industry which is started with less than 5 crore is small scale industry. But during the reforms of 1991 and under the Industrial Policy Reform 1956, the reservation of investment was increased from 5 lakhs to 1 crore. Am I clear? Okay. Last part, monopolies and restrictive trade practices. Now, government enjoyed the monopoly into the industrial development, but we have seen that government could establish only the diversified industrial market. But due to various strict rules and regulation laid down by the government, it hampered the industrial growth in the economic development of a country. Hence, such monopolies was eliminated by the government, not only in the private sector but also in public sector. In many public enterprises, government gave the freedom for expansion and growth without any strict policy laid down by it. So entire monopoly control of government was eliminated. So these are the 4 points of industrial reforms: reduction in industrial licensing, decrease in role of public sector, de-reservation under small scale industry, and monopolies and restrictive trade practices. Now tomorrow we are going to discuss about financial sector reforms and tax reforms. I hope you understood what I explained you. Still, we are available for you. If you have any doubt, feel free to contact us. Thank you.